Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle, where we tell it like it is. Friends, Inside the Trojans Huddle is a game-like panel discussion with WeAreSC columnists, staff writers, historians, and editorial board. We first start off with the pregame show, where we introduce our panel members for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and then give you the latest USC football news. Let's first meet this week's panelist, Marc Kulkin, WeAreSC columnist who writes the Monday Morass, Yay or Nay, and Sunday Takeaways, in addition to regular season football and basketball practice reports. Chris Arledge, former William Jewell College defensive back and team captain, and WeAreSC columnist who writes the popular column Musings with Arledge and is a graduate of the USC Law School. Steve Bisheff, legendary sports writer and former columnist for the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, San Diego Tribune, and the Orange County Register, and is a member of the USC Athletic Hall of Fame, as well as a graduate of USC. Steve has also authored books on USC football, including the well-received Fight On, The Colorful History of USC Football, and Always Compete, a reflection on the Pete Carroll USC era. And I'm Greg Katz, your moderator and producer of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and a weekly columnist for WeAreSC.com, who writes the Friday column, The Obvious and Not So Obvious, and IMHO Sunday, which appears, of course, on Sunday, and an active member of the Football Writers Association of America. Before we kick off this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, here's the latest USC football news as of today's Monday afternoon taping. Number 7, USC Trojans, having dispensed of Fresno State 45-17 on Saturday night in the Coliseum, now turn their attention to this Saturday night's big Pac-12 Conference showdown of undefeated 3-0 teams as the men of Troy travel to Corvallis, Oregon, to take on the Oregon State Beavers in Research Stadium for a 6:30 p.m. Pacific time kickoff, which will be televised on the Pac-12 network. And kickoff time for Saturday's October 1st game against Arizona State in the Coliseum will be 7:30 p.m. and carried on ESPN. And friends, WeAreSC's Inside the Trojans Huddle greatly appreciates your viewer and listenership. And we encourage those of you watching on sites like YouTube to click on the red subscriber button and the like buttons. It's greatly valued and it's free. And we also encourage you to check out WeAreSC.com and become a valued premium member of the best USC football and athletic news source around. So let's get into it. Let's begin with the first half kickoff and some brief comments, guys, on the Trojans' 45-17 victory over the Fresno State Bulldogs before an announced crowd of 67,226. Give me an overall grade. We'll get into specifics of positions later, but we'll start off with Marc Kulkin. Marc, your overall grade for the offense, you give them an A,
maybe an A-. I thought, this team, if anything, they are efficient. They work like a very well-oiled machine, at least in the first quarter. I think Eric McKinney tweeted it out during the game. First 3 games, first 3 possessions per game, touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. They're going to be hard to beat if they are going to maintain that type of efficiency on offense to open a game, regardless of what happens afterwards.
Very good. All right. Welcome back, Steve Bisheff. Good to have you back with us again. So, Steve-O, what grade did you give the USC overall, their offense?
On offense, I would give them an A-. I think I didn't think it was quite up to standards that they showed us in the first 2 games. But I thought, again, it's hard to criticize when they're scoring 42 points, 45 points, I guess. And, they're not turning the ball over. It's pretty amazing. They haven't turned the ball over once in 3 games. I was trying to remember last time I saw a team do that. I can't recall one. It's remarkable, especially with Riley bringing in so many new people and having to adjust, and everyone having to adjust to not turn the ball over once. It's pretty phenomenal.
Chris, was it pretty phenomenal in your eyes?
Not for this unit. I'm going to give them a B, and I'm going to give them a B despite the fact that the numbers were good, because I think they were capable of playing a lot better than they did. Look, Steve is right. No turnovers after 3 games. USC is going to be tough to beat if they don't turn the ball over. And so if you have a game where the offense scores 45 points, gets 517 yards, doesn't turn the ball over, it's hard to nitpick. But I'm going to nitpick a little bit because and it's not a bad thing in some ways. This was not like the Stanford game where everything was easy for a half. I mean, in Stanford, they could do no wrong. They did whatever they wanted. They didn't even reach third down on almost any of those first half drives. It was just, they were playing about as well as a football team can play. This one was a struggle. Even in the touchdown drives, they were struggling. They had to convert third downs. They had to overcome mistakes. That's not a bad thing. We got to see them experience at least a little bit of adversity. And despite that, they continued to play hard and ultimately played well. I like the running game. The running backs were fantastic. I guess we'll talk about them in a minute. I don't think the passing game was as sharp as it could be. But my big issue is they had a chance to ice this game at the end of the first half. They had scored on their first 3 drives. They had 2 more drives in the first half where they could have iced it. They get a long run and drive down deep into the red zone, and then they have an offensive pass interference call and a couple of questionable decisions by Kayla Williams to screw up that drive. But they have another chance to put 28 on the board and effectively in the game. And I couldn't tell what they were doing. Caleb was running around in the pocket. It didn't look like he knew where he was going to go with the ball. He didn't go anywhere with the ball ultimately. Those 2 drives were not okay. And they weren't okay because that was a chance to drive the dagger in and in the game. And look, they were a little bit fortunate because you give the ball back to Fresno State with a pretty good offense that can move the ball 21-10. They score at the end of that half and then get the kickoff to start the second half. You could very easily find yourself in a close game or even down. And so the offense needs to be better than that. They come out in the second half, they run the ball really effectively. They put another 24 points on the board. I mean, it's hard to complain that much, but it wasn't a great performance by that team. They're capable of a lot better than what we saw.
Yeah, and I'll just echo what Chris says. I gave him a B. I thought the offense was good. I thought it wasn't as smooth and consistent as it's been in the past. And we'll talk about quarterback here in a second, but I was happy to see that they scored in the second half. I shuddered to think of what would happen if we had to relive 2 games in a row where they don't score in the second half as far as touchdowns. So I gave them a B. So let's get to specifics and attach a letter grade for each offensive unit accompanied by a brief comment. So what I'm going to let you guys do is we'll start off with Mark. Mark, give us your grade for quarterback, running back, wide receivers, and offensive line in that order. So
Okay.
Have at it. Thank you.
So quarterback, I'm just going to give Caleb a B+, just because it's hard to say that he struggled, but he did through the passing game, at least in the first half. I think he had 10 incompletions. Coming into the game, he had 10 through the first 2 games, and he finished with a total of, I think, 12 incompletions on this game. So he was able to, I guess, recover in the second half, so to speak. But he uses his legs so well. He had a couple of running scores as well as 2 throwing touchdowns. It's hard to nitpick, but at this point, there's still room for improvement with Caleb. That was his 10th or 11th game as a starting quarterback. He's still young, so I have no problem saying that was his worst game as a Trojan, and it was still a pretty strong performance. Running backs, solid A. 2018 was the last time USC had 2 running backs break that century mark. And what Chris brought up when he was talking, I think that was part of their offensive game plan. Fresno State tried to drop 8. They went methodical. They ran the ball. They had 12, 10, 15-yard series that took 5, 6, 4.5 minutes off the clock. So yeah, they had a bunch of third downs, but I thought it worked out. So whether or not they were doing what Fresno was giving them, I thought Caleb managed the game well. B+. Running backs, like I said, an A. Wide receivers, I'm going to give him a B+. Offensive line, I'm going to drop that down to a B. I initially had those guys at a B+, but I think there's going to be some issues if they can't get that left tackle spot secured. And now you're starting to deal with some injuries. So overall, I thought they did okay. Again, you open up running lanes for two 100-yard rushers. You're close to 300 yards through the air. You're doing something right on offense, and the offensive line has to take credit for that. So yeah, it's hard to say they didn't do well. Not as well as they have been. A lot of room for improvement.
All right, Steve Bisheff, quarterback, running backs, wide receivers, offensive line. And again, we include tight ends with the receiving core. So have at it. How did you grade him?
I would give Kayla Williams a B plus just because he was so good in the first two games. And there was a little bit of a drop off here. I thought after the great start, I thought in the second quarter, he had a few occasions where he didn't see the field as well as he has in the past. I remember one specific play when he forced the ball to Addison, who was covered at the time, and Mario Williams was standing at the goal line by himself. So you don't see him do that very often, but he did it in that play. And there was one or two others where I think maybe he forced the ball instead of waiting for a receiver to get open. But you know, it's hard to knock him. He's played so well for 3 games and not turned it over. A B plus is hardly a knock.
Right.
The running game, I thought you have to give an A. To me, it was really encouraging to see Lincoln Riley make a commitment to the running game. After all the BS we heard for the past few years about the air raid and how they were going to run the ball consistently, and they never did. They never really even tried. But I think this game showed that Riley is serious about developing the running game and making it a big part of the USC offense. Wide receivers, I'd give a B plus. Not quite as sensational as the first 2 games, but when you stand back and look at it, with Addison and Mario Williams might be the best combination of USC receivers since Marquise Lee and Robert Woods. It's hard to knock that. And I think the offensive line maybe a B also. I think could have been a little better in the pass protection, but they were opening holes for those running backs, and that was good to see.
All right, let's move on to Chris Arledge. How did you see running backs, quarterbacks, wide receivers, offensive line?
I'm going to start with the running backs. I'm going to give them an A. This is a unit that I'd said in previous weeks that these guys don't have the same God-given talent that the USC has at quarterback and at wide receiver. And I think that's true. But the thing about Travis Dye and Austin Jones is these guys take every ounce of talent they have and use it effectively. I mean, both of them were running extraordinarily well, breaking tackles, running without helmets on. I mean, they were playing football. Those guys were spectacular. It was great to see, especially because, as I think Marc pointed out, there were times when Fresno was trying to do what BYU did to USC a couple of years ago, and they were leaving very few guys in the box. They were putting enough guys back there to try to deal with those receivers, because what else are you going to do?
Right.
And when they did that, USC made them pay. I mean, there were times when they had 5 in the box and USC would run the ball and pick up 12 yards. I think one time there was 4 in the box on the 3rd down, and USC ran the ball for about 15. Thought, go ahead, put 4 in the box if you want, guys. But, Graham Harrell's now on the East Coast. Those guys were great. I'm going to give everybody else a B. Look, Caleb Williams is spectacular. He is human, and we saw him play like a human on Saturday. But he played like a human that doesn't turn the ball over and still accounts for 4 overall touchdowns. So it's nice to have that kind of human at the spot. Same with the wide receivers and tight ends. Those guys were good, not spectacular by their standard. Thought the offensive line played well. There was one example where they bring in the 3rd team offensive left tackle, and he was not yet ready for game speed. I don't think he was even out of his stance by the time that guy was around him and all over Caleb Williams. But I thought most of the other pressures were more on Caleb Williams than they were on the offensive line. And the offensive line did a nice job controlling the game. So I may even give them a B+. It was a good performance. It's nice to see the offense play to struggle a little bit and not play as well as they're capable of, and still put up 45, 5-17 with no turnovers. That's a good thing.
Yeah, and I'll just echo what all of you have said. The no turnovers is really big. I gave Caleb a B. I thought he was for Caleb, and it's a different grading scale. It's like what you expect from a student in an AP class as opposed to a general class. I thought he held on to the ball too long. I think that it gave the false illusion that maybe the offensive line wasn't doing as well as they should. But again, we're talking about a guy who should be an All-American quarterback. And if he has a B game, I'd rather have him have a B game last week, because I know they're going to hopefully gets an A game again ready for Oregon State. Running backs, no brainer. That's an A. If I could just wave a wand, I wish they both had top end speed, but I think it was well served that they get every ounce of it when they run. I especially like Austin Jones when he turns his shoulders to the secondary and just takes it off. And that 25-yard touchdown run by Travis Dye. I don't care if it's Charles White or O.J. Simpson or what have you, of all the many All-Americans that SC's had. That was a great run on determination. Boy, fantastic.
And that run came after he had his manhood crushed between his legs. So
Yeah.
Well, I knew, Mark, that you would point that out. That was very
well, to come back from that's not an easy thing to come back from, and then to break tackles in that run the way he did, it was, like you said, Greg, really impressive.
By the way, was it a forearm to the family area?
No, it was a solid knee.
Well, okay, that's it was painful to watch him come off the field, I'll tell you that. Wide receivers and tight ends, I gave them a B. Only not that Addison or Williams did anything wrong, but when you took it in an overall with the other receivers, I would like to have seen the tight ends get a little bit more involved there in attempts. Offensive line wise, I gave him a B. Bobby Hankins did suffer a little bit of an injury there, and Cortland Ford did not play. So I looked at it and said, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I don't even know if Hankins was ready to play all those snaps, but he did a good job. And you know what? They're only going to get better. And as long as they can stay healthy, that offense is going to be very, very difficult for future opponents. So, all right, let's turn now to the overall defense. Let's begin with an overall letter grade for the defense and some brief comments. Mark, what was your overall grade for the defense?
I was going to start them lower, like maybe a B. And I bumped it up to a B plus solely because of the final goal line stand at the end of the game, for the backups to come in and maintain that 17 points and not allow them to get, as Alex Grinch said, a meaningless score. After the game, Lincoln Riley said, that's going to mean something down the line. So it was a great learning experience. Everybody got the chance. Again, they created 2 more takeaways. They are now plus 10 on the year. That leads FBS. Steve mentioned they haven't turned the ball over through 3 games. So this defense, they've gone from serviceable good. They've broken that boundary. They are now above good and trending towards really good. They're knocking, and wish for injuries, but they're knocking other players out of the game. They're playing physical. When they get punched in the mouth, they'll punch you back twice. And I'm fine with this, well, I'm not okay with it, giving up chunk plays, but I know that they've got players who will make a play when they need to. And it's happened through 3 games so far. That's not, luck. They're planning for this. The Solomon Byrd, his, hat trick on that one play where he caused the fumble, sacked the quarterback, and recovered the fumble. They literally practiced that on Wednesday. I report that in my practice report. It was the perfect technique, and he did it. Go get the ball. Oh, I can grab the ball and the guy and take him to the ground and the ball. Boom.
Okay, Steve, what overall grade did you give the defense?
I give it a B. I thought they played well. You still have to be a little bit disturbed by what they're allowing on the ground. I mean, some gigantic holes you watch other runners run through, and they're going to have to try to solve some of that, I think. Or if they can't, just by talent, then I think it's going to be a problem all through the season, especially against good teams. somebody like Utah, you cringe at what they might do on the ground. I also think you have to take a little bit into account that Fresno State's quarterback went down, and they're playing with a backup quarterback for most of the second half. How much better would they have been if Hader had been able to play the whole game? We don't know. So, but I think the defense, I think, is aggressive. It's showing improvement. I thought Eric Gentry was sensational. I thought he played great. So I think there's some signs that it's getting a little better, but there are still some holes that you're going to have to worry about down the line.
All right, Chris, you're the defensive guy. You played defensive back in college and were decorated. Are you going to decorate this defense? What was your overall grade?
I'm going to give them a B-. Like I said last week, this is a really odd group to try to grade. I mean, on one hand, they gave up 1.7 points per drive. Nobody will beat USC scoring 1.7 points per drive. They're not with this offense. So that's fantastic. 2 more turnovers. They got some quarterback pressure. They knocked out the starting quarterback. I mean, you look at all that and you say, that's a good performance. If you get that every week, USC will win every game. At the same time, so much of what you see out there is frustrating. Both touchdown drives were embarrassingly bad. I mean, it was just chunk play touchdowns. Like, what in the world's going on? And I went back and looked at, by the way, to answer Steve's question, the backup quarterback was 11 of 12 for 140 yards. So they weren't going to play any better with Hader in there. That kid was completing every pass, which is a problem. I went back and looked at those 2 drives, and there were 3 big chunk runs. One of them was sort of a trick play early, fine. But the other 2 were plays where I looked at it, it wasn't a talent thing. On the first touchdown drive, you had the nose guard slashing into the A gap on the left-hand side. You have the only other defensive lineman on the right-hand side of the field who is essentially getting outside leverage in the 7 gap, which means that you have literally nothing on that entire side of the field. Somebody missed an assignment there. I don't know who it was. And then you not only have the I guess it's the right defensive end, essentially taking a contained position on the right-hand side, but you also had the linebacker on that side doing the same thing. So they had the sweep stuff. That was the good news. The bad news is that there was nobody else anywhere in the middle of the field. That right there, I don't know who blew the assignment. I don't know what the call was, but I know somebody, at least somebody blew the assignment. You had another long run on the second touchdown drive where Nick Figueroa comes through unblocked. He could have blown up the play at the mesh point if he wanted to. Instead, they were faking the reverse to the wide receiver, so he takes off like the wide receiver is going to get the ball. You have Deshaun Benton standing straight up out of his stance and getting knocked back about 5 yards onto his back. You have Raylan Goforth, who doesn't know what he's going to do, and he takes about 2 steps forward, just standing in the trash, doesn't take anybody on, doesn't run to grass, and that play goes for like 30 yards. You think, I'm not sure that was talent either. I mean, there's no reason that Benton had to get driven back to his back. There's no reason that Figueroa couldn't have taken the straight line to the quarterback and running back and blown it up, especially because he didn't have contain on the play, and there was a contained guy out there. I mean, again, that was a disastrous play. And I've started to think, well, maybe they just don't have the talent to play run defense. But the big run plays, it wasn't a talent thing. Guys weren't doing their assignment. That's frustrating. Now, that being said, I want you to think about this time period where the offense was not doing its job. Really, the only time all game when they didn't. They could have put the game away. Instead, they let Fresno State hang around it. The defense stops Fresno State at the end of the first half. They get a pick in the end zone. Fresno State gets the ball to start the second half and gets stuffed again. So the defense, when Fresno State had an opportunity to get right back in the game and the offense is not doing its job, the defense twice in a row steps up and gets stops. You don't need that many stops from USC's defense, and they picked a pretty good time to get them. So I'll give them a B-. I still think there's room for improvement, but look, give us 17-point outings every Saturday and USC's going 12-0.
And you know what, Chris, on that second touchdown, there's Fresno second touchdown, it literally went over Gentry's fingertip. He literally, if he's one step back in coverage, he's got another, he knocks down another pass.
That kid's special, by the way.
Absolutely.
I mean, he was quite a find, and he's only going to get better. He's still young. He's going to put on another 20 pounds by the time he's out of here, and I have no idea what he's going to look like then. But he's a monster.
All right. Well, I gave the defense a C+. I'm a hard grader. I'll admit it. A couple of good things I thought was the goal line stand at the end. They had a lot of pride. They were determined, and yes, I agree. I also agree with what Alex Grinch said afterwards. He's not satisfied. I tell you what, I saw. Fife came in after Hainer got knocked out, and I thought Fife, based on the statistics and what I saw, was very efficient, and I didn't expect him to be that efficient. There was a lot of missed tackles, not as bad as what we saw in previous seasons, but enough to make me say, you know what, there's still a work in progress there in some of the techniques. So I was a little disappointed, but in the end, I mean, you could say this, it's all about the scoreboard, and they only got 17 points. And I don't think the loss of Hainer detracts from the 17 points, because I thought Fife went in there and played rather well. I thought there were some good things from Solomon Byrd, although he got blocked on the big run. They kicked him out nicely. But I thought that Byrd has shown a lot of improvement. I think he'll continue to show improvement. And I think he's going to end up being a starter there. I think he's just that dominant. So I gave him a C+ when I see better tackling and I don't see some of the big chunk plays. The rushing defense still is, to me, is whoa. I mean, I just think against better opponents like Utah. And remember, I don't think SC is playing at this point in time. I think we could all agree SC is playing for a championship, not just having a winning record. And they show they're capable of winning a championship. So in order to get there, they got to make those tackles. They can't give up those big yards rushing. And until they do, it's not an elite defense by any stretch of the imagination, but it only gave up 17 points. So, okay, let's move on. Okay. In terms of moving on, let us not overlook the special teams. Overall grade for the special teams, guys. Just brief comments if you want. Let's go with Mark. Overall special teams grade.
I'll go B-, C+.
Okay.
That kickoff coverage is just, they're not giving up anything. They're always ahead enough that even if they do give up a return for a touchdown, it's probably not going to hurt them, but they got to get that fixed. Other than that, the punting got much better. I thought Aiden, he hit his kick solid. We're making our point after attempts, and Dennis hit his one field goal. So it's hard to knock him, but it does stand out that kickoff coverage is it needs some work.
Okay, let's ask Steve Bishop. What was your overall grade for the
I pretty much agree with Mark. The kickoff coverage obviously needs improvement. The rest of it seemed fine. It was good to see somebody make a 45-yard field goal, know that you can take that shot when you need it. So I thought overall, I'd give it a C+.
Fair enough. Chris?
Yeah, C+ is fine. The place kicking was good. The rest of the special teams, other than the kickoff return and the kickoff unit, were fine. They didn't do anything to stand out as bad. It's a problem with both kickoff units, frankly. The kickoff return unit, doesn't block anybody, and the kickoff unit doesn't get off blocks. Every kickoff is either in the end zone or at the 35-yard line. It's not good. And I don't know if it's a personnel thing, and they need to put some other guys on that kickoff unit, or if we have some coaching breakdowns. I don't know. I haven't analyzed it, and I don't know what they're trying to accomplish. But I know whatever they're trying to accomplish, they're not doing it. I mean, it's just a mess right now. And the reality is, that is going to bite them at some point this season if they don't fix it. And we've seen it now multiple games. It's enough. If those guys aren't going to get off blocks, stay in lanes, and make tackles, then get them off the field and put somebody else in who will, because that's a problem. It's a huge problem.
All right, I totally agree with Chris on this one and some of the others that you've remarked. I gave it a C+. I think Dennis Lynch, perfect on PATs and on his only field goal attempt. That was good. Stadhouse, the kicker, had 8 kickoffs, 3 were returned. But the big issue to me is the coverage on both covering a kickoff and getting a return. There isn't any on the return game, so to speak. For the most part, maybe you can say that's a good thing. I don't know. Punt returns, haven't seen anything to overexcite me at this point. But I do want to remind viewers that watch us, we're giving our opinions on this, and this is only our opinions. But I hope that you'll all appreciate we're not putting on cardinal and gold glasses and saying everything that happens is good. We kind of like this show to be, we tell it like it is. And if you don't like a particular panelist's viewpoint, that's their viewpoint, and you're certainly welcome to yours, but this is just how we see it. So taking that, moving on, second quarter, Oregon State preview. We begin the second quarter with a look at the undefeated Oregon State Beavers, who crushed Montana State in Corvallis on Saturday night, 68-28. Oregon State is coached by former Beavers quarterback Jonathan Smith, now in his 5th season at OSU, and he is a protege of College Football Hall of Fame coach Dennis Erickson. Jonathan Smith has, without question, revitalized the Beavers football program, as proven by last season's 45-27 shellacking of our Trojans in the Coliseum. Personnel-wise, Oregon State returned 17 starters, 6 on offense, 8 on defense, along with his place kicker and punter. And the Beavers are led by quarterback Chance Nolan on offense, linebacker Omar Sprites on defense, and two-way performer Jack Costello. Beavers are looking for their first 4-0 start since 2012. And since 2006, Oregon State is 3-2 against USC in home games. Trojans opened a 6.5-point favorite to defeat Oregon State in Reser Stadium, which I might add can only accommodate 25,000 fans due to ongoing stadium renovations of one side of the stadium. Panel, this is a good one. Your overall thoughts on the Oregon State Beavers. Are they real or pretend? And what must the Trojans do to defeat the Beavers in Reser Stadium on Saturday night? What's it going to take, Chris Arledge?
25,000 fans. UCLA could almost fill that place up. I mean, the Bruins are probably putting 16 or 17,000 in, which is about what the high school games around here draw. All right, so this is a good Oregon State team. They're well coached. They're disciplined. But let's not overstate it. It's not an immensely talented team by any stretch of the imagination. This team is equivalent to the Fresno State team we just saw. They're dangerous offensively. They're going to play hard for all 4 quarters. But that's what they are, which means that if USC plays well, USC wins. Oregon State will run the ball. That's a problem because USC doesn't always like to stop that. And let's be honest, playing at Oregon State, even if it's only one side of the stadium, that place has been a house of horrors for USC for a long time. This is not just a Clay Helton issue. This is, I mean, Pete Carroll had his struggles up there. You had the disastrous 2008 loss. You had the 2006 loss, also disastrous. Reggie rescued them with a punt return in the fog before that. They might have lost that one. So that's a tough place to play. Here's the thing. I think USC is going to take this game seriously. I think it helps that they struggled a little bit offensively. I think the defense already knows they don't get to take any nights off because they take every 4th play off. And so I think that USC will play well. I expect them to win. It won't be easy. And if the Trojans do win this, the schedule opens up really nicely. You essentially have the Utah game, which will be a monumental challenge. And other than that, you have a bunch of teams that USC beats if it just plays decently, all the way up until UCLA and Notre Dame. So you win this one, and you're probably looking at worst case scenario 9-1 going into your rivalry games. I mean, that makes this an enormous game. And I think they'll play well and win.
All right, Mark. Hopefully you're going to be at that game as part of the crew that's up there. Hopefully. What do you think? Is this going to be an easy one, a tough one? How do you view it?
Typically, I would say this is going to be a tough game. You know, I'm on board with Chris. I brought this up. You brought it up, Greg. I'm sure Steve has brought it up in the past. Corvallis it's USC's kryptonite on the road in this conference. For whatever reason, they struggle there more than anywhere else. They might win more games, but they still struggle there. And I think there's a chance for fog this weekend because they're having some really hot temperatures, and we know it cools down in the evening up there. So when those two things come together, that's when you get your fog. On that note, I'm not sure if anyone's aware of this. Eric brought it up on the message board a little while ago. The Beavers are going to be without two of their better players, including their starting tight end and running back. So as of right now, USC's, you know, to quote Greg, they're 6.5 favorites. They're 6.5 point favorites. I'm interested to see how that line moves, because people in Vegas and who set these lines, they do it for a reason. They're pretty smart. I see USC actually, like you said, going in focused, pulling out another, 42, 45 points. Maybe Oregon State gets into the 20s. USC is going to walk away from this game with another win. I actually feel confident, not because of the injuries to Oregon State, just because the way the team is built, developing. The confidence is growing with this team. And that, again, that fourth and goal, ending the game the way they did, that kind of energy in the locker room, that becomes like a virus. And anybody who's been in the locker room, once your confidence grows and you're good, that's a hard combination to beat.
All right, Steve, you've been a long time observer of USC football, columnist and beat writer. What's going to happen up in Corvallis on Saturday night?
I've been in Corvallis for a lot of those games, and I can attest that it's a tough place to play for USC. It always has been. I remember Pete Carroll was so rankled by that loss, the Mark Sanchez team losing. He thought it cost them a shot at the national championship, and it did. And they never got back to the big game because of that one loss on their record. And it was bothering him weeks after. I remember a home game 2 weeks after, and Pete ran by me cussing after a big win. They won easily. And in the locker room, I went up to him. I said, "Why were you cussing? You won easy." He said, "I'm cussing because I still remember that Oregon State game, and it bothered me. We never should have lost that game." And his team just didn't take it seriously, and they were beaten badly that night. And I think the mindset of this game is going to be really important. All these new kids who aren't familiar with Corvallis and the history aren't going to realize it. And hopefully Riley and his staff are going to emphasize it enough and show them and get them in the right mental frame, because I think that's what's important. There's no question they're more talented. But I think just the fact that Vegas has opened them up at only 6.5 points tells you all you have to know. It could be a very tough game. The weather could dictate it can be wet. The fog. I remember Reggie, I was at the game where Reggie saved them by returning that long punt in the fog. So, there are a lot of factors, and I really respect Jonathan Smith. I think he's one of the better unknown coaches in the country. And I think they better be ready. They have 17 starters coming back from a team that really whipped USC badly. So I think a lot of factors they're going to have to be careful for. Just on talent alone, USC should win the game.
Well, I'll tell you, I go back to 1967 with O.J. Simpson, the national championship year.
Right.
And I remember when USC went up to Corvallis, the same stadium actually had a different name. It wasn't called Reser Stadium at the time. But somehow, some way, SC could not score.
3-0.
It was 3-0 on a field goal. The Beavers were coached by what they called the Great Pumpkin, DeAndros, and he had basically a pound and ground attack.
Right.
he had Bill Earthquake Enyard, and they had, I think it was Jesse Freitas, the defensive
Right.
lineman. And they just were able to control the ball and get enough for a field goal. But that was like, that's for me, I always remembered that game. It was a crusher. But SC, of course, went on to win the national championship, which was the good thing. But from that point on, it always seemed that SC's had a problem up there. Now, having been up there a number of times myself, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's a one-lane highway coming off the freeway. It's just a bizarre thing. Eugene and Corvallis are really kind of different in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah.
And the stadium at Oregon State, I think my best memories of it was they've done some renovation, but you used to have to dress across the street in the locker rooms,
Right.
so almost like an old PE building. And you literally had to walk out amongst all the fans, and they had this kind of a rope line, and you had to go into the stadium, down a ramp. It was just a miserable experience. And I've seen all the great SC teams with Pete going in there. And you know what? It's a hard place to play. Now, I think the good news is that USC, the players, a lot of them on defense, didn't play in that game last year. The two inside linebackers for SC, I think, is going to make a bit of a difference. But SC has to not let Oregon State control the ball. And you know what? Chance Nolan's a good quarterback for Oregon State. Last week, he was 19 to 25 for 276 yards and 4 touchdowns. I know it was Montana State. One player that really, I think fans are really going to appreciate is Jack Costello, who's an inside linebacker, came in as a quarterback, figured out he can't play quarterback, said, I'll go to linebacker. And he did so well at linebacker. They said, well, how about using me as the Wildcat guy? And he was the guy that scored the touchdown at Fresno State to win the game on the last play of the game. And, there's a huge number. I think it's 47 players from California are on the roster for Oregon State. SC only has one player from the state of Oregon, and that is Brandon Peely, who actually is from Alaska and has come in to play at, I think it was Westfield High School there. So I think it's going to be a tough game. And I think Jonathan Smith, mark my words on this, take it for what it's worth, that if Chip Kelly ever gets fired or relieved of UCLA, it would not shock me. Jonathan Smith was a former high school quarterback at Glendora, California, that a return home to the Southland would be a real possibility. And he is a good coach. So with that, let's move to halftime. Panel, the Trojans remain the number 7 team in the nation, and after 3 games remain undefeated. With the 4th of the regular season now completed, what has surprised you about 2022, and what has disappointed you in 2022? Steve, what's your surprise for the team up to this point? What's your disappointment?
I'm sorry, the surprise team in the country?
No, just the team in general.
What
has surprised you about this team after 3 games going to its 4th, and what has disappointed you? In other words, your expectations.
Well, I think what surprised me the most is the composure of the quarterback and the team in general to function as well as it has. Again, without a turnover after 3 games, I think is very impressive. They've just been very businesslike, taking care of what they have to do. You wouldn't have thought a team with this many transfers would be this consistent and this together. And I think that's the most encouraging thing that I've seen about this team. Disappointment-wise, I'm really not disappointed in the defense because I knew there would be problems. You're disappointed that they can't defend the run a little better than they have so far. You hope they will get better at that. If they don't, it could cause a lot of problems.
Chris, what has surprised you about this team? What's disappointed you up to this point?
I'm not surprised by a whole lot, really. I mean, I'm surprised by +10 in turnovers. I didn't see that coming, and it's probably not sustainable. Although I think this is an offense that's not going to turn the ball over very much. So I think they're going to continue to be plus all year. I'm a little bit surprised that we're all relying on Solomon Byrd to play big minutes the rest of the way, but I think we are. I'm not terribly surprised, and I'm not disappointed. Look, the most important thing in college football is to have the right head coach. The second most important thing in college football is to have an extraordinarily talented quarterback. So when USC landed both of those things in the offseason, I thought it's probably going to be a pretty good football team. And I didn't think they were going to lose any of these first 3 games, and they didn't. So I'm not surprised. I think they're where they should be. We need to see the defense tighten up, particularly in terms of assignments in the run game. They just have to get better at that. But if they do, and the defense isn't going to be spectacular at any point this year. They don't have to be. The offense is going to be so good that I think they just continue to moderate improvements on the defensive side of the ball. The offense continue to not turn the ball over, and they're just going to win a bunch of games.
Marc Kulkin, surprise and disappointment.
Just so I don't repeat what Chris said, I'll go to the other side of the ball. I'm surprised on offense that they are, not that they're good, but how efficient they've been from the go, from game 1 through. They don't start slow. And you would think with so many new players, new coaching staff, that there would be some hiccups getting these guys, working as a well-oiled machine. That hasn't been the case. So that surprised me very little, but it surprised me enough. What's disappointed me, the fact that we're not getting the offensive backups any playing time at the end of the game. Like Miller Moss, he should be playing every 4th quarter. And right now he's just not getting that opportunity. For whatever reason, it hasn't happened. Look, if that's where I have to go to be disappointed, I think we're going to be okay.
And I'll say that what surprised me is not the performance of the offense. I knew they were going to be really, really good. But what surprised me overall team-wise, how you had so many players from so many different areas of the country that all came together. And after 3 games, they really look like they like each other. They bond with each other. I think that goal line stand at the end of the Fresno State game showed the pride they had in each other. I think a lot of it is the leadership of Kayla Williams for both sides of the ball. I think one of the things that intrigued me was that Lincoln Riley went out and took, I guess, a psychologist that deals with this in an athletic world and has taken the lead of this psychologist, let him speak to the team and helped bond that process. I think the disappointment for me is there's still too many missed tackles for my taste and too many chunk plays, but I know it's a high-risk defense. And we'll see how that works out in later games. But, this is just the first 4th of the season. So there's a lot more to go, but they're certainly headed in a potentially great direction. All right. Before we begin the second half, a reminder that you're watching or listening to WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle. This week's WeAreSC columnists include Marc Kulkin, Chris Arledge, Steve Bisheff, and I'm your moderator, Greg Katz. We also encourage you to check out the WeAreSC.com website, part of the On3 network, and become a subscriber to the best coverage of USC football and recruiting and overall coverage of USC Trojans athletic. And as a reminder, WeAreSC is currently offering a 1-week free trial of WeAreSC.com, which includes breaking stories, analysis such as Inside the Trojans Huddle, recruiting with Scott Schrader, the best of the best, and data for USC football, basketball, and the balance of USC athletics. So with that, we're ready for the second half kickoff, and that means time for Musings with Chris Arledge. A reminder, any comments or opinions expressed by Chris Arledge are solely those of his own and are not in any shape or form a reflection of the opinions of WeAreSC.com or the On3 network. Any republication, rebroadcast, use, or other descriptions of Musings with Arledge without the express written consent of the University of Oregon and the University of Notre Dame Alumni Associations is strictly prohibited. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we bring you the Inside the Trojans Huddle version of Christopher Arledge's Musings with Arledge. Christopher?
Those 2 alumni organizations love me, by the way. I'm a favorite of theirs. All right, I'm gonna vent for just a minute about one of ESPN's writers. I like to stay up to date on college football. Through the years, almost all of the other sports teams that I followed closely when I was a kid have sort of fallen by the wayside. I'm only emotionally attached to USC football at this point, probably too emotionally attached. So I like to see what's going on with the National Football Writers. I also like the advanced metrics that people are using to analyze sports. I try to use them a little bit in a very amateur way in my articles here in We Are SC. I think they help us to understand the game better. I think we learned that some of the things that we've taken for granted for a long time may not make a lot of sense. So I think it's good. I like it that coverage of sports is going that direction. But it's also true that you can take empirical data and while pretending to be engaged in a dispassionate, logical search for the truth, engage in absolute stupidity. So ESPN has a writer, Bill Connolly. He's a pretty well-known analytics guy, and he writes about college football. Now, I first took notice of what he was doing this offseason when I noticed that he had this preseason analysis where he put together what he calls his SP+. He takes a lot of facts and figures, and he comes up with his ranking, and it's supposed to help us predict what's going to happen. I noticed this in the offseason because he had USC number 46 in the country in the offseason, behind Nebraska, Fresno, SMU, Purdue, even UCLA, a bunch of riffraff. Now, I forgave him because I knew he was relying on last year's numbers. And while it probably doesn't make any sense to base this year's USC ranking on last year's Clay Helton program, when USC added Lincoln Riley, Kayla Williams, Jordan Addison, and about a dozen other superstar players, fine. But today, I go to ESPN.com, and I see that he's ranking college football's remaining undefeated teams. He has USC 12th. Now, I get why the Trojans are behind the big three. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, fine. Those teams have been dominant for some time. I have no problem with their ranking USC behind Michigan and Clemson. Even though Clemson's offense looks terrible, I think Dabo and Clemson are entitled to the benefit of the doubt. OU, fine. No problem. But it also has USC ranked behind Ole Miss, Penn State, Tennessee, Oklahoma State, and Kentucky. He says with USC, it just comes down to trust. He doesn't trust the defense. Fine. I don't trust the defense either. But you trust Tennessee's defense? Why would you trust anything coming out of that program other than Peyton Manning, who hasn't been there in 20-something years? You think Kentucky really is a better football program than USC? Even Kentucky's own basketball coach doesn't think anything of Kentucky's program. Had to apologize when he pointed out that Kentucky's a basketball program and nobody cares about their football team. But Bill Connolly trusts those guys more than he trusts USC. Apparently they're money. So I see this morning and I get worked up. So I decide I'm going to look into what this guy's all about. And I realize that he's written a book on the 50 greatest college football teams of all time. Apparently he used his math skills to put together this ranking. Sounds interesting. So I go to check it out. He has a couple of old teams at the very top of the poll, 1 and 2. Fine, whatever. His third greatest team of all time, 2008 Oklahoma Sooners. A 2-loss team. They lost to Texas and they lost to Tim Tebow in Florida by 10 in the national title game. A 2-loss team that finished 4th in the final AP poll is the 3rd best team of all time, according to an ESPN college football writer. We're talking about a team that was literally the 2nd best team in its stadium twice that year because they blew out a bunch of ranked teams. Those teams happen to be Kansas, Missouri, Texas Tech, and TCU. His 11th best team, 1981 Penn State, also lost 2 games. 1995 Nebraska, the undefeated team that humiliated Steve Spurrier and Florida by about 40 in the national title game, 20th. 2001 Miami with Ed Reed, Jeremy Shockey, Brian McKinney, Philip Buchanan, Willis McGahee, Andre Johnson, Clinton Portis, Frank Gore, Najee Davenport, and about 38 other Pro Bowlers. One of the most talented teams of all time, 27. Now, Greg, Steve, I don't want you guys to get angry right now, okay? So I want you to control yourself. The 1972 USC Trojans. The team that Keith Jackson called the best team of all time. This is a team that blew out everybody all year except for one reasonably close win against Stanford, which still wasn't in doubt. They beat 3 top 10 teams by a combined 68 points. They had 13 guys on that roster who would eventually be All-Americans, 33 future NFL players. Lynn Swann, Sam Bam Cunningham, Richard Wood. This team was a monster. 29th best team of all time, according to Bill Connolly. Now look, here's the thing. One of the great things about college football is the debates, right? Constant debating about whether somebody's overrated, whether somebody's underrated. It's what makes the game fun. But if somebody really thinks that 1972 USC is the 29th best team of all time, I guess they can say it. It's a free country. You're allowed to say ridiculous things. But nobody really believes that. Nobody that actually watches football games or knows any of the names I just read out could possibly believe that. The only person who could believe that is somebody who constructed a flawed and ridiculous formula that spits out silly results that everybody has to laugh at. This guy, by the way, I think is working on a book where the numbers will conclude that the Beatles are the 38th best rock band of all time, and that Lincoln and Washington were the 40th and 41st best presidents of all time. That's what the numbers tell us. Listen, ESPN, please stop this. You have all the money in the world. You're the most famous sports company of all time. You can hire just about anybody you want. And I love it that you're doing analytics, and I look forward to reading articles on analytics. But can we please stop publishing a guy who says this kind of nonsense? We live in a day where everybody wants to claim that they're led by the science. Crunch the numbers. That'll tell you all you need to know. But if you crunch the numbers and you conclude that Magic Johnson was the 28th best point guard in the 1980s, you might want to take a step back and reconsider your approach. It's not okay. This USC team is not perfect. We've talked about that already. They are not the 12th best of the undefeated teams left in college football. And if Bill Connolly really thinks they are, he should be writing about women's soccer, or he should be writing about something else, not college football. Knock it off, ESPN.
Well, I will tell you, Bill Connolly just dropped about 50,000 feet of credibility in my eyes. Steve, are you offended by Bill Connolly?
I agree with Chris, obviously, that the 72 team isn't one of the 10 best teams of all time, then I haven't seen any teams. There's no question it was. It's ridiculous.
The bad thing about getting older is that you're older. The good news is you have able to watch USC football from, let's say, 1962 or earlier to where it is today. And having seen that 1972 team, what was I at the time? I think I was 22 years old. I've seen the great Nebraska teams, Notre Dame teams, but that SC team, believe me, and I have my Cardinal and Gold glasses off. They were arguably the best of all time. And
they could play with anybody.
They can't handle that 11-2 Oklahoma team from 2008, though, gentlemen. Couldn't handle those guys. 11-2. All right, look. I shouldn't get so worked up about it. It doesn't.
Well,
really
you should get worked over that one. Believe me.
I mean, 2008 Oklahoma. They were ranked number 4 in the final poll. That was fortunate. That team never should have been in the national title game.
I just want to thank Bill for taking me off the most stupid person list.
And with that, we transitioned from the third quarter to the fourth quarter with the traditional lighting of the Chris Arledge Memorial Coliseum torch. And a reminder, you can watch Inside the Trojans Huddle every Tuesday, either directly on wearesc.com, the website, or on YouTube. And with that, we're going to transition into the fourth quarter, which means predictions for week 4 as Pac-12 play begins, full competition. So everybody's in play. It's all about the conference now. So let's go over it, get the guys' opinions on who's going to win it. Brief comment, if you would. Let's start off with UCLA, now 3-0, 0-0 Pac-12. They're at Colorado at 0-3, 0-0 Pac-12. That's 11 a.m. kickoff on Pac-12 Network. UCLA is favored by 20.5 points. Mark?
You know, UCLA was gifted a win at home against South Alabama. They're hitting the road for the first time against a really, really, really bad Colorado team with a head coach that has literally been given the vote of confidence. You know, I think he's already been given the word that he won't be back next year, just between you, me, and everybody who's watching now. It wouldn't surprise me to see Colorado win this game. I don't know how good UCLA really is. They should win by 25 points. But to struggle at home against South Alabama and literally be given the win or the chance to go win it, you know, kick the field goal, make them drive the field. I can see Chip Kelly and UCLA losing this game, but I'm going to say they're going to win. They'll struggle to a win.
Steve, are they going to struggle to a win?
Well, I think they'll win fairly easily. Colorado's really bad, but UCLA really was lucky against South Alabama. That decision by the South Alabama coach at the end was one of the worst I've ever seen. I don't understand what he was doing or thinking. If he kicks the field goal, he's got an excellent chance to win, to score one of the biggest upsets in the country. Instead, he tries to fake some kind of fake field goal and go for it, and none of it made sense.
Horrible.
UCLA was very lucky. I think they're better than they looked in that game. They better be, or it's going to be a long year for UCLA.
They were looking ahead to the Buffaloes. There you go, Steve.
Right.
Good. Chris, what's going to happen?
Look, I've been, against my better judgment, I've been pumping up UCLA on this program just about every week. I think they should be dangerous offensively. They have a lot of experience and a lot of talent on that side of the ball. What in the world was that? South Alabama is not just a small school. They're not even good in the small. They were 2-6 in their conference last year. I mean, Colorado is a major step up in competition from what UCLA played last week. That was embarrassing. And so I'm tired of it. I'm not going to defend UCLA anymore. I'm not going to pump them up anymore. When Appalachian State beat Michigan, Appalachian State was great at that lower division, unlike South Alabama, which is not. Appalachian State had their big Hail Mary this week. You guys see that? Fantastic play. I think Colorado is going to bottle up some of that Hail Mary magic, maybe a repeat of what we saw with Cordell Stewart back in the day. I'm picking Colorado to beat UCLA on a Hail Mary with 2 seconds left on the clock, and I can't wait to watch it.
Oh, awesome.
All right. Well, I don't know whether Mary, Jesus, Joseph, and whoever could save Colorado on this one. I think UCLA is going to stomp them. I think that Carl Dorrell is the walking dead in terms of coaching. Why they hired him in the first place is way beyond me. He had no business being the head coach of Colorado. I think UCLA, I'm not going to say they're going to name the score, but Colorado's offense is just a disaster. All right, let's move on to Arizona 2-1, 0-0 Pac-12 at Cal 2-1, 0-0 the Pac-12. That's a 2:30 p.m. kickoff on the Pac-12 network. Cal is favored by 6 points. You agree with that, Mark?
Where's it played again? I'm sorry.
At Cal. Arizona at Cal.
Yeah, I'm taking the Bears on this one. I like Arizona. They've improved. I don't think they've improved enough to score on the road against Wilcox's defense. And I thought they acquitted themselves quite well at Notre Dame. They probably should have won that game.
Agree. Steve, how do you see it?
You know, a very astute former football coach named Tommy Prothro once told me never take a team that just played all out and barely lost to a better team. And that's exactly what Cal just did against Notre Dame. They put up a great effort and lost. And then never pick them the next week, Prothro said, and I'm not going to. I'm going to pick Arizona in an upset.
Wow.
All right. Go Wildcats. Chris, do you agree with Steve?
Yeah, so Cal's defense looked pretty good against the Irish last week. But this is a major step up in competition facing an Arizona offense after facing that Notre Dame offense. And I think they're going to be surprised. If they still expect it to be like Notre Dame, they're going to see some real football this week. I'm also going to pick Arizona. I don't think I agree with Steve. I think that it's hard to get over a loss like that. They had a chance to really do something special, beat Notre Dame in the green uniforms. By the way, why is Notre Dame wearing green uniforms for games against Cal now? And why is it that color green, that highlighter color? It looked like something Oregon would put on the field. That's embarrassing. Speaking of embarrassing, Cal has an offense that's embarrassing. They're going to score 6 points. Arizona will score 7.
Wow, that's a good way of looking at it. All right, I'm kind of caught between a rock and a hard place with this one. I know the game's at Cal, and so I feel that should be worth at least a field goal. I watched Cal against Notre Dame. I thought Cal left it out on the field. They did the best they could. Arizona's kind of a goofy team to me because, they've got Jaden Delore at quarterback, and I happen to think he's a pretty good quarterback who could put a lot of points on the board. But then I say, Cal has got a good defense, and I don't think the defense will be let down against Arizona. I think maybe the thought of losing to Arizona would be a big motivation. But I'm going to go with Cal. I don't know if it's going to be by or less, but I think this is it for Cal. I think any hopes of having a successful season, even at 2-1, they lose to Arizona. A big chunk of their ethos is going to die. Interesting one here. The next one is number 15, Oregon, 2-1 now, 0-0 in the pack. At Washington State, 3-0, 1 p.m. Fox. Oregon favored by 6 points. This is a highlight game to me. Mark, what do you think?
Who played for BYU? Did their starting receivers play in that game? I didn't get a chance to watch.
I think they were missing a couple of receivers.
This game's on the Palouse. I am so tempted to go with Washington State right now. Yeah, I'm gonna take them in the upset. I am. I want to see how Oregon plays against a good team that is healthy. And I think Washington State's a good team.
Steve, you agree? Is Washington State a good team? Can they pull the upset against Oregon?
No, they have looked good so far, but I'd have to pick Oregon. I think Oregon has rebounded from that Florida loss and still a good team. I think that they'll be tough to beat as the season goes on. I pick Oregon in that game.
Bo Nix is still their quarterback, Steve.
All right. Chris, is Bo Nix going to be the difference in this game?
If so, then Oregon's in trouble. Look, I like to pick against Oregon every chance I get. You guys know that. And I'm tempted to do so again. I'm not a believer in Washington State. Washington State has made their reputation by beating Wisconsin in a game where Washington State really couldn't do much offensively. I think Oregon's defense is going to be just fine against Washington State. And Washington State could make it a game if they stack the box and make Bo Nix beat them. Then it could get interesting. But as much as I would love Washington State to win this one, I just can't pull the trigger on it. I think Oregon wins.
I agree. I think Oregon's going to win, but it won't shock me if Washington State upsets them. I think I was surprised how well the Washington State defense plays. And the new quarterback for Washington State has done actually a pretty reasonable good job. And let's be honest, they did win at Wisconsin. There's something to be said if you can win on Camp Randall Field. They are pretty good. If Oregon can't get their running game in order, they're in trouble. They're in trouble. All right, speaking of trouble, we've got Stanford 1-1 in the conference, 0-1 in the Pac-12. At number 18, I don't know if we can even call them surprising Washington at this point. They're 3-0, 0-0 in the Pac-12. That's a 7:30 p.m. Kickoff. FS1, Washington is favored by 12 points. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going Huskies on this one. I think Kalen DeBoer has gone in there, just like Lincoln Riley's coming to USC, and he's changed the culture overnight. Washington's a hard place to win as well. And when their fans are in the stands and they're backing up that team, I don't know if Stanford has enough to play with Washington on the road. I got Washington winning this one.
Steve, you agree, disagree?
I do agree. I watched a little bit of Washington this past weekend. The quarterback is very impressive. Good arm, good accuracy. And it does seem like the coach there has changed the culture. I think Washington is a team to be wary of. I think they'll handle Stanford.
Chris?
Yeah, I think Washington wins easily. Stanford. I like McKee. I think he's a good quarterback. Stanford has some big targets. They'll make some plays offensively, but that's a tall order to go to Washington and win. And I just don't think Stanford's that good. Stanford's probably a 5-7 team this year. They're not going to get one of their 5 at Washington.
I think Stanford's hurting. I think Washington's on the rise. I think the change in coaching made the big difference, but they have talent on Washington. Make no mistake. They've got talent. DeBoer has put it together and added a few pieces here or there. I think Washington is going to definitely win by more than 12 points. Let's put it that way. And Husky Stadium, when they're winning, is really a difficult place to play. All right, number 13, Utah, 2-1, 0-0 in the pack. At ASU, 1-2, 0-0 in the pack. 7:30 p.m. ESPN. Utah is favored by 15.5 points. Mark, is it even going to be a game?
It shouldn't be. I mean, Herm Edwards is, going to be watching from the stands or behind the TV, one of the two. But that Arizona State team, they're going to rival Colorado for being the worst in conference. Yeah, Utah should win this game fairly easily. I know it's on the road, but ASU is not good. They're not good at all.
Steve, route or no route?
Oh, I think Utah cruises here. They should win. They can almost name the number. I think obviously the Arizona State program is in tatters, and it's pretty tough to win any game under those circumstances. And certainly they're not going to beat a team like Utah.
Okay. What do you say, Chris?
I say that Queen Elizabeth has more life than this Arizona State football team. These guys are horrific. It doesn't get any worse than where they are right now. And while it may in some sense be a relief that that finally all the drama's behind them with Herm Edwards, they're not going to be able to regroup. They're on their way to a 2-win season at best, and Utah will cover that 15.5 in the first quarter.
Utes by a rout. All right, number 7, USC 3-0, 1-0 in the Pac-12 at Oregon State, 3-0, 0-0 in the Pac-12. 6:30 p.m. Pac-12 Network is the place to watch it. Trojans are favored by 6.5 points. Mark, Trojans going to do it?
Oh yeah, they're going to cover. I'm not concerned about this game, and look, it's probably going to come back and bite me in the ass, but I'm coming from the perspective again that this team's confidence just continues to grow. They proved that they can win on the road at a place at Stanford where they haven't won before, or at least in a long time. And they're going to look at Oregon State on the road as another challenge because they struggle there. And I think they're going to get reminded of how they came to the Coliseum the year before and just literally tore USC up. And that type of stuff doesn't go over well in the USC locker room, especially against a team like Oregon State. They're going to want, this is revenge tour number 2.
All right, Steve, you've seen them all, the upsets in Corvallis. Is this going to be one of them?
Well, I don't think so. I think a lot of it depends on USC's mindset. And I think a coach like Riley will certainly remind them of what's happened there in the past and not let them think that it's a pushover, because it isn't. I think the way USC is playing, the way the offense is rolling, they win the game, but it's not going to be a rout. It'll be a tough football game.
How tough will it be, Chris? Are the Trojans going to pull it out?
Trojans going to pull it out. Look, we talked about the difficulty of playing at Oregon State, but those USC teams that struggled in Oregon State had been so good for so long that they could come in and just assume they're going to walk over their opponent. I don't think this USC team believes that at this point. Oregon State is good, but they're about Fresno State good. USC is going to score 40 points. Is Oregon State going to score 40 points? Nah, they'll score in the low to mid 20s. USC wins and covers.
And I agree. I think Kayla Williams is going to have a tremendous game on Saturday night. I think the defense will play better than they have all season. And I think that Lincoln Riley will tell them, look, we exercised the Stanford memories from last year. We need to go out and do the same thing against Oregon State and show them that we are SC. So, and with that, let's go and our weekly Georgia Southern prediction presented by the unofficial Clay Helton fan club. Last Saturday evening, head coach Clay Helton and the Georgia Southern Eagles lost at Alabama Birmingham 35-21. This Saturday, Georgia Southern 2-1 hosts the Ball State Cardinals. We're 1-2. Georgia Southern is an 8.5-point favorite. Mark, a very quick prediction.
Clay Helton. He's going to win this game. He's going to win this game.
Okay, Steve, you agree?
Well, I think Jonathan Clay's season was made with that victory over Nebraska. I think they'll win this game.
Chris?
So I'll be honest, I don't watch a lot of Ball State Cardinals football. I will never watch a Georgia Southern game. If Georgia Southern scheduled USC, I would skip it. So I don't know, but here's what I do know. I know that Clay Helton is coaching Georgia Southern, and they're favored by 8.5. That's not an overwhelming number, but that means they're a pretty strong favorite. Clay Helton, when his team is a pretty strong favorite, is good for 12 penalties, 4 turnovers, and a very, very sloppy win, but they'll pull it out.
And I agree, but they won't pull it out by 8.5. He never covers. So I'll still take him because they're at home. But as one knows, one never knows with a Helton coach team. All right, let's get to our overtime and wrap this show up. It's time to answer some viewer questions for panel answers in a free-for-all format. Folks, if you'd like to submit a question that you can answer, or we can answer, excuse me, or give you our opinion, just go to either the Gary P. or We Are SC members message boards at wearesc.com. From there, you'll see the topic thread regarding questions for Inside the Trojans Huddle. Question 1 from Romy from Huntington Beach. In your estimation, panel, how effective has the Boulevard been so far? Now, the Boulevard is this corporation, I guess that's the word, that does all these great things in promoting USC athletes and also providing NIL. I believe that's it. In fact, the latest BMLV production was the video announcement that all the members of the USC football team were given these electric motor scooters to go from class to class. It was quite an effective little promo. But how effective is this whole BLVD thing going? And Romy wants to know, do you think it's very effective, effective, non-effective, non-existent? And the same question for student body right, and have they meshed? Let me start off. I'll just quickly say, student body right is in trouble. I know one of the main people that they were counting on has told me that they're not going to be involved in it. One of the people that was involved in it actually was in Mike Bones' suite at the Coliseum during the Stanford game. So I would think that that's going to go by the wayside. As far as BLVD, I will say they're going at this point effective. I think they are driving to very effective. What say you guys?
Yeah, they got out of the box slow. They're effective right now. I'm curious though, maybe Chris, you can answer this. Is there any liability for USC if one of the players gets hurt using the scooters?
I suspect not, unless, I mean, USC would have to be negligent, which means that they fell below the reasonable standard of care, which means that they would have to have some reason to believe that that guy's going to hurt himself on that scooter. I don't know what that would be. No, I think they're okay with that.
Okay, let's go to question 2 from Robert.
Hey, that's by the way, that's not legal advice for people out there. Don't go around passing out scooters and then sue me and try to put me on the spot. It's too early to know whether Boulevard's working. We'll know after a recruiting class or two.
All right, question 2 from Robert from Riverside, California. Although Corey Foreman's presence hasn't been felt on the stat sheet, do you think that has been more of a product of the 2-run heavy teams we have faced? And will Corey shine against passing teams? My feeling on it is I don't know what to make of Corey Foreman at this point. I don't think he's lived up to his potential, which means unproven talent as one who has coached. But you know what? Solomon Byrd has definitely passed him by. So I think it's up to Corey to take advantage of every time he gets in to show that he belongs in a more prominent role.
I think Corey is just going to have to be humbled. He's going to have to get coached up and understand that, you know, what he did in high school stopped in high school. And I think one of the biggest things that's hurt Corey was leaving Centennial to go play that club football during the COVID year. And he was pampered. And I don't know if he's made that adjustment to college yet. If he is, it's taking him some time to kind of get going. So right now, he is what he is. He's going to have to get coached up, and he's going to have to accept his role until he starts producing on the field. Other players are going to play ahead of him.
Any other viewpoints on this?
Look, I don't want to keep piling on Corey
No.
Foreman because we've talked about him a fair amount. The reality is everybody badly wants Corey Foreman to be a superstar edge player. And
Agreed.
he's not going to be. The reason that his presence hasn't been felt on the stat sheet is not because of who they're playing. Tooley manages to find his way onto the stat sheet. Byrd has managed to find his way onto the stat sheet. The reality is that Corey Foreman had 1 tackle Saturday. Good play, by the way. I happen to be isolated on him on that play. It was a run play. Took on the blocker, shed him, met the guy in the hole, stopped him for about a 1-yard gain. It was a nice play, but he's not making plays. And I'm going to tell you the thing that worries me, and I noticed this last year, is a lot of times, especially with an edge rusher, what you'll see a lot of times is you'll see a guy who flashes, who will maybe he has a quick step, maybe there's something else about him physically that's impressive, but he's not yet disciplined enough. He makes mistakes, etc. I don't think Corey Foreman flashes out there. He does not look like a better athlete than the guys on the other side of the field. He just doesn't. He is what he is. And I think Bird's going to play a lot and play well.
All right, and we'll in the interest of time, we'll do just one quick question from Kevin in Los Angeles. Did we ever find out what happened to wide receiver Jake Smith? Is he still enrolled at USC? I do not know. Marc Kulkin, do you know?
I don't know if he's still enrolled. He's medically retired. That he's not going to be playing football anymore for USC. And we wish him well. That's all you want to say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, if you have a question or comments for our panel, go to either of the We Are SC message boards, click on the thread that pertains to Inside the Trojans Huddle viewer or listenership questions. So folks, that will do it for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. A reminder that next Tuesday, we'll review the Oregon State game as well as preview the Arizona State game, as well as our usual comments on relevant USC college football topics. And of course, give you our weekly Pac-12 conference predictions. So until then, a big thank you to this week's panel of Marc Kulkin, Chris Arledge, and Steve Bishop. Great job, guys. And a special big thank you to all of you for watching or listening to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Until next Tuesday, this is your moderator, Greg Katz, reminding you all to fight on, everybody.